Do you ever feel like you and your partner are just speaking totally different languages? Like you're saying words in plain English, but somehow they're just not computing on the other side. True story from my life. My husband comes back from trips, drops a suitcase on our bedroom floor, and that's it. And the thing sits there for weeks. Clothes spilling out. Then it's hard to figure out what's the dirty laundry, what's the trip laundry, and things are just everywhere. Well, last month, after his second or third trip of the year, I kind of lost it. I'm like, this happens every single time you travel. The suitcase becomes bedroom furniture, and then his response is just confusion. Why bring up other trips? I just got home yesterday. Well, guess what? This isn't a character flaw on either side, really. It's brain wiring. And the thing is, this is a common disconnect. When I talk about this with my female friends, they instantly get it. They also connect past events with current ones, and not because they're holding grudges, but because their brains naturally link related experiences together. But here's what we're told. Good communicators stay present and don't bring up the past issues. But what if your brain is literally built to connect patterns across time? What if that's not immaturity, but your actual neural wiring? Women have highways connecting both sides of our brains, which is why we can talk and read facial expressions and remember that time in 2018 when something similar happened all at once. But men's brains, they're more like separate neighborhoods with fewer roads between them. Language happens in one area, emotions in another, with just fewer routes connecting them. And neither is wrong, just different. So when we fight these biological facts, we create relationship hell. The unpacked suitcase becomes proof that he doesn't care about the things that I value. And his confusion becomes proof that you're too emotional. The resentment starts to pile up until you can't even remember why you picked this person. But let's challenge this. What if these differences aren't bugs, but features? What if instead of trying to force your partner to think like you, because good luck with that, you learn to leverage your unique strengths? What if understanding why he genuinely doesn't see that suitcase the same way unlocks a whole new level of connection? And here's something radical. What if we stopped wasting energy trying to make him notice things his brain literally isn't wired to track? Today, our guest is Stephen Furlich. He's a professor who's studied gender communication through both social science and biology lenses. And after seeing the same patterns across different cultures and time periods, he started looking at brain structure and hormones to understand why these differences stick around no matter how much society changes. So in this episode, you're going to learn why women connect past and present experiences while men focus only on what's happening now, the brain science behind women's ability to read nonverbal cues, and why this superpower can sometimes bite us in the ass, and real strategies to work with your brain differences instead of fighting against them. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up, or text the word morning to 33777.
It's been found, and just like I talked about, the connections, I think, is already settled. Sex hormones are as well. Whereas with testosterone tends to hinder language ability, which makes sense why boys have more language problems early on and girls outperform in language ability. So that's not bad enough. Estrogen actually helps language ability. And with adult males tend to have 20 times more testosterone, and adult females have 20 times more estrogen. You can see how that really helps to differentiate male and female communication.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
Yeah, what inspired you to make gender communication part of your life story?
So I've taught a gender communication class for the last several years, well, more than that. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was that there were some gender communication differences between males and females. And the social science research that I kept coming across showed consistencies with this. But in the social sciences, it usually attributed it to social learning, the way that we grow up in our families, school, society, the groups that we belong to. But I thought if I keep seeing these same consistent gender communication differences between males and females in different cultures, different time periods, there must be something more consistent with it. So I started looking at biology. I started looking at psychology, biology, neuroscience, and psychiatry, and found that there are explanations in the biological sex differences between males and females for some of these communication differences, such as brain structural differences, sex hormone differences, and other areas as well. So I could go into just a little bit more about that if you want me to.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So starting off with the general theme or the general topic of my book is looking at social behavioral differences between males and females and how it's explained through biological differences. So at conception, everyone starts off of what we usually think of on the same track of what female is. So it's much easier to make a female than it is a male because of testosterone, and male sex hormones are much more difficult to make a male. After about 4 months after conception, that's when the sex hormones start to differentiate males from females. So this is where it really kicks into the theme of my book, is that the sex hormones, the 4 months after conception, when they start to differentiate between the males and the females, it actually influences the brain structural differences between males and females. So get this, you can now analyze a human brain and with over 90% accuracy predict if it's male or female based upon the structural differences between males and females. So you have these structural differences that are that distinct and in the areas of communication and social behaviors as well. Also, what's come out more recently is not only the structural differences, but the activation differences as well. So you have a male and you have a female doing the exact same task, communicate about the same thing, watch the exact same film or whatever else. And the there's activation differences between the male and the female, in as much as that you can look at these activation differences and again predict with over 90% accuracy if that brain is male or female. So the bottom line is, if all communication starts in the brain, which it does, and we have this much of structural differences, this much of activity differences, then it shouldn't be that far of a leap or that surprising that we have differences in perception, understanding, emotions, topics communicated about, words that are used, interests, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow. I'm curious, have you gotten a lot of pushback for this idea? Because it seems like we're living in a time where people are really trying to make a case against biological differences in sexes and sort of denying certain things that exist.
They're obvious. Yeah, so that's a good question and a good timely question for the day and age that we live in. So there's a lot of controversy out there. And again, for decades, and I place part of the blame on Deborah Tannen. Back in 1990, she published a book, and in her book, she acknowledges that there are communication differences between males and females, but she attributed it all to culture. So the people who studied under her became professors, taught classes, and those people study under them, et cetera, is part of the reason that that's what all they knew. So that's all they're exposed to, is this social type of understanding. But then also, it's much more of an agenda pushed today as well. that for some reason it's offensive or sexist or something like that to suggest that males and females are different, and that that's going to influence the way that we communicate. So in my book, earlier chapters, maybe 2 or something, I talk about the research in academia, and there's also been peer-reviewed journal articles. So these are looked highly upon articles that have been retracted. So they've been found that there's too many flaws in them. There's one I describe in detail that these group of authors, they tried to put something that was rather outlandish about feminism, understanding of gender communication. They got it published, and they said it's all a hoax, that they made it all up, and it's accepted for publication. So a lot of the research out there has been discredited for those reasons. So that's why I try to look at science. Science is rather objective. It takes the researchers somewhat removed from what you're studying, and to some degree, the numbers speak for themselves. So again, the examples that we just looked at, and we'll go into more detail in a second, if you're analyzing a human brain, the structures are that different, where you could predict over 90% accuracy, and the activation are that different, where you could predict with over 90% accuracy, then I think it's a bit foolish to assume we're going to communicate the same and understand the world around us the same as well.
I don't know any married person who doesn't just know for a fact that men and women communicate differently. There's a lot of single people who deny it, but I think that's why they're single.
And that's what you find also in academia as well, a lot of times as well. So I think the suggestion is see things the way they are, not the way you want them to be.
Yeah.
Play the hand you have, not the one you want. You know, there's a saying out there, or a cliche or whatever, in the stock market, you have to trade the market you have, not the one that you want. You know, you want the one that's going up, but if, you know, things aren't moving in an up direction, what good is that? So trying to push on a string or force what isn't there.
So you mentioned how a lot of people believe gender communication differences are purely cultural. What's one piece of undeniable biological evidence that proves otherwise? And then what's the implications of that?
For the longest time, and I could go into several different areas. Actually, you mind if I throw 3 topics and you pick?
Yeah.
Okay, so nonverbal communication, or language communication, or play behavior of children and career choices later on.
Language communication for 500.
Okay, good choice. And I think that's usually what usually comes to people's mind when you think about what are some gender communication differences. So from early on, and it's probably not too surprising, that girls tend to outperform boys in language ability, the way they read, the way they write, those types of abilities. And that boys, they're diagnosed with more language and speech disorders from early on as well. Males tend to have more visual connections to words, females more auditory. So the exact same conversation, it's going to be perceived differently, with males more visual and females more auditory. This is where it comes, I think, less disputable, where females have a larger and more active hippocampus, and that's responsible for language, relationships, and memory. So it plays a role in that. So if it's larger and more active, the hippocampus, and plays a role in language, in relationships and memory, then probably females are going to communicate much better in those particular areas. Brodmann's areas 44 and 45 in the brain is 20% larger for females. And those areas are responsible for verbal fluency, verbal memory. And also, this is something that is somewhat of an epiphany that, as far as I'm concerned, the research has already settled, that females have a much more interconnected brain. So they have more connections across both hemispheres, whereas us males, we tend to have more of an intra-hemisphere connections. We have more connections within each hemisphere. So what that does, talk about that in a second. And then also, when it comes to language itself, males, we tend to have our left side of the brain is activated for language, and our right side is activated for emotion, whereas with females, more of their overall brain is activated. So we talked about more of their overall brain is activated, having more connections across both hemispheres. Well, so what that allows her to do is to talk about the current topic, expand upon it, talk about past topics, and tie into emotions as well. She has more connections across both hemispheres. She could tap into all those much more easier. With us, we have more connections within each hemisphere. So, and language is on the left side activated, emotion on the right side. So it's much more difficult to communicate about the topic and emotion and tie in the past experiences as well. So the bottom line is, us males, we need to understand that she's not unfocused when she ties in all these different topics from the past, the current topic, and emotions as well. It's not a personal attack on us. And she needs to understand that when you ask us a question, we answer the question and don't tie any emotion or past experiences or other or more details, is because we're not as equipped to do so. We have more of the connections within each hemisphere. And again, the left side for language, the right side for emotion. But women need to understand we're not emotionally removed. We are answering the question, and that's what we're equipped. So he's going to have a much more literal type of response. And what we need to understand is that she's not over describing. It just makes sense to her to tie all these things together, and it's easier for her. And what she needs to understand is that we're not leaving out information or emotion. It's just much more difficult for us to do. The last thing is with sex hormones in language is that it's been found, and just like I talked about, the connections, I think, is already settled. Sex hormones are as well. Whereas with testosterone tends to hinder language ability, which makes sense why boys have more language problems early on and girls outperform in language ability. So that's not bad enough. Estrogen actually helps language ability. And with adult males tend to have 20 times more testosterone, and adult females have 20 times more estrogen. You can see how that really helps to differentiate male and female communication.
Have you ever thought about the true cost of a bad hire? It's not just the financial hit. It's the energy drain, the team disruption, and the time that you'll never get back. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. What makes Indeed different is how they've reimagined the entire hiring process. Their sponsored jobs feature isn't just about visibility. It's about precision. Your job post actually reaches the specific people with the skills you're looking for, not just anyone searching for work. And this targeted approach makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. But it's not just about quantity. It's quality applications from people who actually fit what you're looking for. I love that Indeed has eliminated all the traditional hiring headaches. There are no monthly subscriptions to forget about, no long-term contracts to trap you, and you only pay for actual results. Think about this. While we've been talking, 23 hires were made on Indeed worldwide. That's 23 businesses that just found their missing piece. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/mindlove. Just go to Indeed.com/mindlove right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/mindlove. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know how we invest in so many things? Our homes, our education, maybe even a fitness membership. But when it comes to our mental health, sometimes we hesitate. Why is that? Therapy can feel like a really big investment, but the state of your mind is just as important as your physical health, and maybe even more so since it affects literally everything else in your life. But let's talk numbers for a second. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, which adds up really fast. With BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save up to 50% per session on average. You pay a flat fee for weekly sessions, which means you're saving both money and time. I have seen firsthand how therapy can totally transform someone's life. It's not just for crisis situations. It's for learning better coping skills, setting healthy boundaries, and just becoming the best version of yourself. Sometimes we just need someone to talk to who can offer a new perspective. What makes BetterHelp stand out is their scale. They have over 30,000 therapists and have helped more than 5 million people worldwide. The platform makes it so easy to fit therapy into your busy life. You just click a button to join a session. And if you don't click with your therapist, you can switch at any time. Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/mindlove today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. So this illustrates perfectly one of the common complaints that I see within marriages where something's happening and then all of a sudden the woman is like, but it also happened this time and this time and this time. And the man's like, why are you bringing in all these past things? And it seems like a lower self ego thing to do. But it's like, from my point of view, I need you to understand that it's not this one instant that's bugging me. It's the fact that it's a pattern. So I need to bring up the other things because otherwise this one thing wouldn't be a problem. And then the man's like, yeah, but let's focus on just this thing. Otherwise it doesn't make sense to me. And I'm like, it only makes sense to me this way.
Yes. And just like we already talked about that, she has a much more interconnected brain. So therefore everything's more connected. So it does relate to what you're talking about and previously. That's why you're tying in, because it does make sense. It does relate to it. And for her, it does. But for us, it's unless we know that, that's the difference. We just don't understand because it's difficult for us to understand because we don't have that ability. We just focus in. And that's another difference as well. We tend to be able to focus in on one particular topic much more so, or a bit better than what females can as well. So I think part of it is just empathy, understanding the other person's perspective and what their abilities are. So I think both, have responsibilities to understand the other person. She needs to understand what our limitations are, and us, we need to understand how it's all connected and what makes sense to her and how it's all related.
What I'm hearing you say is I'm right.
to a large degree, yes.
So let's talk about the nonverbal now.
Okay, and I do give females this. It's already, as far as I'm concerned, it's already settled that females tend to be superior social creatures.
I'll take that.
Okay, you'll take that win. So we talked about the language differences, and I don't think it's much disputed after we just discussed that females are superior with that. But it's been found rather consistently over decades that females are superior when it comes to nonverbal communication as well. So when it comes to, I'll just throw out a few studies. One is they had a curtain, and the curtain separated two different people. All you do is you reach your hand through the curtain and you touch the other person's hand, so you don't see anything else. The females are much better at accurately labeling the other person's emotions than what the male is, just through that touch alone. But then also looking at pictures of just the eyes of other people, females are superior at labeling the emotion of that person just by looking at their eyes as well. So those are just two examples of superior empathy abilities. But here's some of the science behind it. So during social interactions, females tend to have higher levels of oxytocin during social interactions. That's a bonding chemical. So you feel a connection with the other person. So if you're bonding with the other person, you feel a connection with the other person. It's not that far of a leap to say that you're going to empathize or understand the other person and experience more similar emotions, what they do as well through oxytocin. Mirror neurons, this is a big one. Probably not as many people are familiar with this. Those are those neurons that are activated when you have an interaction with someone else. And the mirror neurons, what they do is you observe someone else's nonverbal behaviors, and then your body prepares to display those same types of nonverbal behaviors. So your body's prepared to do it. So if your body is prepared to do the same thing that you see someone else doing, you're going to have a similar type of emotion experience as that other person. So more mirror neurons are activated during social interactions. And we talked about how that females have a more interconnected brain. So therefore, this is key. Having more connections across both hemispheres for her, that allows her to engage in the conversation while at the same time analyze the other person's nonverbal behaviors. So she could do both, multitask at the same time. and she also has more overall brain activation during social interactions. So the bottom line with that is okay, the oxytocin, the bonding chemicals, the mirror neurons, the interconnected brain, more overall brain activations. She's going to be superior when it comes to nonverbal perception and understanding of other people. So during a social interaction, he's going to have a more literal understanding of the conversation, what's being said, less so on what's not being said. She is going to have a much more deeper understanding of all these subtleties that come into play. So this is sort of my opinion that oftentimes us males, and you could give your insight in a second, that oftentimes us males, we tend to oversimplify conversations and just rely upon what's being said. And sometimes females overcomplicate it and read too deeply into it because she has much more cues to go off of. So we're not going to read into subtleties and subtle cues that's part of her communication to drop towards us. We're not going to pick those up, and that's not going to help the relationship at all. And then she needs to understand again that the way that we communicate isn't relying as much on nonverbal communication, but we're going to have a more literal understanding of what she says and not as much on the nonverbal.
Yeah, I very much see this in my life and just comparing notes with my husband and how we're perceiving things, for sure. And also, even though that's considered a strength on the woman's side, I often see the simplicity of my husband's perception of it as the bigger strength. Because like you mentioned, sometimes women have a tendency to read too deeply into things where I'm like, no, you just missed that micro reaction that she did right then when she said this. I know she's not happy about this. And the thing is yes, I may have picked that up, but maybe it's in everybody's best interest to just act like it didn't happen.
Because it may open up another can of worms.
Yeah, well, especially in business things where it's like, maybe she didn't really like that, but she's got to suck it up and go with it. Now I feel uncomfortable doing this thing. I actually just had a weird email interaction with somebody like an hour before this call, and I had to run it by my husband. I was like, am I reading too deeply? He's like, yes. And I was like, no, I need to feel heard in this. You have to agree with me first and then tell me. But it was this silly thing where I wish I would have just like let it go instead of saying, that email sounded rather confrontational. Why did I need to do that?
Who did it come from, a male or female?
Okay, I'll let you know, and then we can dig into this. This came from a female. I had to cancel an interview, and my Calendly has a reason and automatically sends an email. So I said, I have a scheduling conflict. Can we reschedule this? I see some emails going back and forth between their team. We got a cancellation. There's no reason why. I was like, there's a reason in that email. You just didn't look at it, is what I'm thinking, but I was busy. Then I see, do we have a phone number for Melissa? So finally respond is like, I prefer to keep it to email. Here's the link to reschedule. And then the assistant of the person that I rescheduled said, can you tell me why this was canceled without email communication? And to me, I'm like, that sounds pretty condescending. Like even if there wasn't email communication, why send that email? So I couldn't help myself. I wrote back. My higher self would have let it go. My middle self responded and was just like, my Calendly sends out an email or it has a reason, search your inbox. And then I said, this email sounded a little confrontational. And then she writes back, I'm sorry you mistook my email. And I'm like, you're still coming at me with this. And my husband's just like, honestly, you're the one who sounds snappy. I was like, if this was your assistant, would you be happy with this? And he's like, no, I probably would have sent an email to soften the tone. I'm like, that's all I'm saying. Like, I don't need to interview this person. So it was the dumbest little micro thing. And we're both kind of like, what about you? What about you? Going back and forth. What do you see, Stephen?
I see that one of the things, and we could talk about this, later on or in a little bit, social interactions are much more emotionally intense for females. So I would assume that she probably took it personally that it's not a schedule and conflict alone, but maybe she took it personally on her as well, that you're canceling her and not just the schedule itself. So she read into it beyond the schedule itself and took it personally. And then in response, you took it personally as well. And that's one of the things that I go into, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is that social interactions are much more emotionally intense for females and tends to build and build and build. And it seems like that's sort of what happened here. Whereas with maybe if it was between two males, it would have just been topic, 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 and then that would have been the end of it in 3 emails.
Yeah, could have been so much more simple. And with women, it's like
I'll say for sure, I would not have said, "Can we discuss this on the phone?" Or do we need to discuss this beyond email? I would have just handled it through email because the task would have been done, would have been solved. There's no need that, why do we need to take an unnecessary step and talk about it? But for a female, the relationship component of it, talking to each other plays a role in it.
True. Yeah, and I see why women are such superheroes in the there's something off about Nancy over there. Let me go talk to her. Let me see what's happening. And then there's these deep bonding moments that often are missed in male friendships. But it's very rare that I talk to a man and oh yeah, no, Joe and I had a falling out. But women, I'm always surprised. I'm oh wow, you're still friends with her. It's been 6 years. Nice.
And with us, we compartmentalize it quite a bit. So if the other person isn't around, it's not really on the top of our mind or bothering us or whatever else. So what you just said, 2 things popped in my mind. One is that females are much better lie detectors, that they could detect deception much better than what males can. And then also, we could eventually talk about this as well. I have a whole chapter on women's sixth sense. If you want to pronounce it better, you can.
It's a hard one.
Yeah.
There's this belief that men struggle with emotions because they're taught to suppress them. But you say that the brain differences play a big role. Go deeper in that.
So one of the things that isn't identified out there, but it should be, is that the serotonin system has been recognized in science as being sexually dimorphic for over 40 years. So if it's been sexually dimorphic for over 40 years, how come more people don't know about it? So what serotonin does, it helps to regulate emotions and also our moods as well. So you can see how with our happiness, our depression, whatever else, serotonin helps to regulate those because it's a neurotransmitter. It communicates to the rest of the body, carrying messages, how we should feel, how we should react, things like that. So it's related to depression, sleep, memory, other areas as well. So like I already talked about, for over 40 years, it's been recognized that it's sexually dimorphic, the serotonin system between males and females. So the amount that is available for us to synthesize and metabolize and use is much less for females than it is for males. Females tend to have slower serotonin synthesis. How could they process it? How much they have lower levels of activity with it. It's even been found they have lower levels in the brain as well of serotonin. Testosterone is used to treat depression. Okay, so if testosterone treats depression, it's because it increases the serotonin levels. And with adult males having 20 times more testosterone than adult females, you can see why females are more vulnerable to depression itself. Depression is also found, and anxiety is found on the X chromosome. And with females having 2 X chromosomes, you can see why they're more vulnerable to depression and anxiety. Females tend to have more anxiety issues, whereas us males, we tend to have more substance control types of issues. This is where it comes into play, what people may be able to identify, I think, or relate to much more so, that females, they tend to have more activation in the locus coeruleus, and that's the part that's responsible for emotional process. So if you have more activation in the locus coeruleus that processes the emotions, then what's that going to do? That's going to make all of the social interactions much more emotionally intense. because you're putting more energy into it. You're processing much more of it, and it's taking much more of your cognitive efforts to process this emotion that's taking place. Depression's also linked to major hormonal shifts for females as well. So within maybe a given month, those shifts are going to influence her emotional balance and her moods and things like that, much more so than what a male would within the same month as well. Here's something else. So if having more activation in the locus coeruleus isn't enough for emotional processing, this is something that's concrete. Females tend to have more brain activation when they see subliminal negative faces. So you're not even aware of that you're looking at a negative face, and you have more brain activation in the emotional areas. So that really alludes to how that emotion is more of a biological instinct, much more takes up much more cognitive effort, and it's much more emotionally intense, these types of social interactions. I mean, you're looking at a face that you're not even aware of, and it's having an impact on you if it's negative.
Wow. There's a reason why so often I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I feel psychic when it comes to people's emotions. There'll be just different things, and I'll pick up on such a small thing. It really does feel like a superpower. And for a long time, before I had a partner to just bounce things off of, and then like, I don't know, not let it go by, I was like, am I just making stuff up? But then so often I was proved right, or I would talk to their friend and be like, no, she actually was really upset about that. She was trying to hide it. Oh, okay. But I do feel for most of my life, I'm like, I don't know what it is. You got to trust me. I feel a little, I don't know if I'm a little psychic, but it's just my brain doing what my brain does.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion for females in particular, is go with your gut instinct a lot of times. So I could go in this in a second. But one thing to just throw out there is that females have a larger and more active insula. And what that does is you take in the sensory information. So the sensory cues around our environment that you're in right now, and you can process it much better than what us males can. So you have more pieces of the puzzle to put together for a given situation than what males can. So if you like, I could go into chapter 12, Woman's Sixth Sense.
Yeah, tell me what I'm good at.
Okay. All five senses. That's what you're good at. So females are superior when it comes to the ability to understand social cues. Okay. They have a better neuronal network for social processing, so much better to process the information in the environment around them. They have more empathy and more activation from faces. So again, starting from an early age, girls, they look at faces much more so than what boys do. Okay. It's much easier. So maybe in your marriage or next time you go to a social gathering, think about this, that mimicry, this is sort of I'm getting off track just sort of, but we could tie it back in there. So mimicry is the nonverbal behaviors of one person mimicking the nonverbal behaviors of another person. And it's much easier for the female to mimic the male's nonverbal behaviors than it is for the males. So why is that? Because females are much better to empathize with other people than what males are able to. So she can adapt her behaviors to the male much easier. Oxytocin, we talked about that. That's much higher in social situations, that bonding chemical. So you understand the other person, you empathize with them much more so. So here we go into the five senses. Females are superior in all five senses. They could smell a larger range of different smells. They could taste a larger range of different taste, more subtleties. They're more sensitive to touch. They could hear a larger range of different sounds on a spectrum, and estrogen is related to that, probably not coincidentally. So during the ability to reproduce, that's in the woman's life when her estrogen is higher or highest, and her hearing ability is it's related to hearing ability as well, estrogen. So when you have a baby, you need to hear all those nuances of what does the baby need. Does the baby need, is it sick? Is it happy? Is it sad? Is it hungry? All those types of things. And then sight as well. So females in my nonverbal epiphany book, I have not a graph, but image. And it has a boy on one side, a girl on another. It has a whole spectrum of different colors of shades, and it shows the few different categories that the male can see and all the different shades that the female can see, because she has more P cells in the retina, and that's for detail and color. And then also the X chromosome is responsible for color as well. With females having two X chromosomes, you can see how she could see better colors. Also, that she has a better color vocabulary as well. So with all that tied together, that she has better hearing ability, more sensitive to touch, taste, smell, and then in particular sight as well. All those five senses are superior. Bring them all together. She has much more information and much more cues to go off of in a social situation that she may not even be cognitively or aware of on the level that she's aware of it, but maybe at a subconscious level she's aware of it, because all these things kick in together.
It's so fascinating because I'm tempted to name this episode Why Women Are Better, but we know that so often I really believe in the divine design of things. Like when we spend so much time resisting, no, that's not different, or no, I'm just as good at this. But if we spent just as much time trying to understand the why, and like you said earlier, beautifully, like, no, play the hand that you're dealt. Like that's what's going to give you the edge, and just sort of understanding it more. Yeah, women need those really perceptive cues because of raising their children. And just like we mentioned earlier, sometimes it's easy, like you have a better social situation not picking up on every little thing. It's easier to just let things go, to have people experience their own inner world without all of a sudden thinking it has something to do with me. It reminds me of that Mel Gibson movie, What Women Want, where at first, like, hearing the women's thoughts is way too overwhelming. And he's like, just take me back to being a normal man for a minute.
All those interconnections are competing with each other.
Exactly.
So I guess one of the bottom lines is, so maybe in marriages, relationships, things like that, why can't both complement each other and have a better type of team, as opposed to one's better at this and one better than the other, then rely on it. So maybe for the woman, rely more on the social types of understanding social situations, especially when it comes to children, raising children, things like that. Whereas us males, we tend to be superior when it comes to spatial ability. So testosterone is highly related or highly correlated with spatial ability. So it's been found rather consistently that we're much better with cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, navigating certain types of things, hand and eye coordination. And then females tend to rely and do about equal as what males do when it comes to landmark directions. So if you're going to a certain place, not saying if it's north, south, east, or west, but what's some of the major landmarks? What's a building? What's a park? What's something else that you could go off of? So that's one thing we tend to have an edge up on, is spatial ability. And then also we tend to be able to rest much better as well. That females tend to have much more brain activation when trying to rest, and it doesn't shut down nearly to the level that us males do. And I think that's something that females need to understand, that when we're resting, or if we're doing a restful activity, maybe watching a sporting event on TV or something, it's not going to be very productive to try and have a conversation with us, because again, we're compartmentalized and our activity really shuts down much more so when we're trying to rest. So those are two things that males tend to have the upper hand with.
You mentioned how women remember emotional experiences more vividly. What advice would you give to couples when one partner wants to move on from a fight and the other one, probably the woman, can't forget it?
I guess one of the things to keep in mind is how each person's going to experience it, that particular conflict itself. So one of the things that is found in the research and has been around for a while is that there is a conflict dynamic out there, and it's demand withdrawal. And with demand withdrawal, oftentimes it's the woman who demands more, and the man, not surprisingly, takes it personally and withdraws even more. So does that help her meet her needs? No, it makes things worse. When she needs something addressed, and he just shuts down. So Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, we saw that come out in that trial, that there was some sort of birthday going on, her birthday or something. He walks in, he looks around, sees all these people around, her friends or wherever. He doesn't like it, so he just walks out, and then she retaliates against him, which we heard come out in the court trial. We don't want to go into details about that. And then also in one of the tape recordings, Amber Heard even blurts out, every time we have a fight, Johnny, you just walk out and leave. So with the demand withdrawal type of dynamic, is that in relationships, it takes much more effort for us males to process relationship type of information. So we're not going to pick up on the subtle types of cues that she may think that there are problems in the relationship. We're not going to pick up on it. Again, we talked about the different senses and the social awareness. We're just not as equipped with it. And we also talked about that males have inferior language abilities. So again, we're not going to be able to invest emotionally, language-wise, nearly as well as what females can, or nearly as much to that extent as what females can. Language-wise, emotionally. So she's going to feel like she's much more emotionally invested in the relationship than what he is. And that's going to frustrate her when things, those small things aren't being worked out that he's oblivious to and is not aware of. So neither one is going to feel valued. What he contributes to the relationship oftentimes is what he does. So it's through actions. It's not through what he says, but again, we don't have the language abilities to disclose all this information, emotion, and tie it all into. Whereas with her, she's going to invest much more so with the language and emotion in the relationship. So that's part of the demand withdrawal type of relationship. And we see that play out in public types of relationships. Sylvester Stallone and his wife went through it, and there's other examples as well. So what can be done is positive touch prior to the conflict. So maybe an embrace, holding each other, arm around the shoulder, holding hands, whatever. All that increases positive types of behaviors because that increases oxytocin level. So oxytocin is highly related to touch. So having touch prior to a conflict increases those bonding chemicals of oxytocin. So that could help the conflict. Also, and this is what we touched on just briefly, but I would say, and this is sort of my perspective, is next time you go to some sort of social gathering, look around at different couples and have a barometer measuring how healthy is that relationship just based upon their mimic behaviors. So positive mimic behaviors that both are mimicking each other non-verbally. So the man and the woman have similar types of non-verbal behaviors. That increases oxytocin levels as well. So touch does, and mimic behaviors, which makes sense, actually activates similar areas of the brain as well. So you empathize and you understand the other person much better as well. So those are a few things that could be done. Touch, mimic behaviors, increasing oxytocin levels, and then also understanding that she's much more emotionally invested in the relationship. She's going to notice much more of the nuanced problems than what he is. And there's two things on the top of my mind I'll just throw out briefly and then I'll stop. One is that during therapy, so couples therapy, that's how you could tell how well the therapy is progressing is how well does each person mimic the other partner's nonverbal behaviors and make sure that they're mimicking each other's behaviors and not the therapist. And then the other thing that popped in my mind is that the majority of people who file for divorce over age 50 are filed by the woman. So those are for a number of reasons. One is her estrogen levels dramatically decrease during menopause. And then secondly, probably it's because she picks up on all those things that just build and build and build of problems with the relationship, and us males tend to be oblivious to it and thinks if she's not talking about it, then it must be going okay.
When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I have this problem with consistency. Some weeks I'm super motivated to plan healthy meals, and other weeks it's just overwhelming. Do you know what I mean? But that all changed thanks to Hungry Root. It's the easiest way to eat healthy, and it's actually consistent. What's amazing about Hungry Root is how flexible it is. They're like a personal shopper and nutritionist rolled into one. They recommend healthy groceries and meals tailored to your tastes and health goals. But I love how their recipes are actually fast, 15 minutes or less, not chef 15 minutes, where you somehow need to chop 10 vegetables in 30 seconds. Real life 15 minutes. And that's a game changer for those weeks when I just can't deal with complex cooking. The variety keeps things interesting too. With over 15,000 recipes each week, I'm never bored. And they have everything from main meals to healthy snacks, smoothies, and even ready-to-eat options for those extra busy days. But what I appreciate most is the quality. No high fructose corn syrup, artificial sweeteners, or preservatives in any of their food. Just real ingredients that make you feel good. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box plus a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code mindlove. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code mindlove, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code mindlove.
This episode is brought to you by Chevy Silverado. When it's time for you to ditch the blacktop and head off-road, do it in a truck that says no to nothing. The Chevy Silverado Trail Boss. Get the rugged capability of its Z71 suspension and 2-inch factory lift. Plus, impressive torque and towing capacity thanks to an available Duramax 3-liter turbo diesel engine. Where other trucks call it quits, you'll just be getting started. Visit Chevy.com to learn more.
I find it fun really understanding the differences, because it's like a game. Instead of being frustrated, you can just see, all right, it's kind of like with my toddler. I can't take the things he says personally. He's a maniac half the time, you know? And so there's moments where I'm just looking at him and he's having a meltdown. I'm trying to reason with him and I can tell nothing's getting through. He's in full-blown meltdown mode. He's 4. And so I have to just hug him, you know, like calm his nervous system. And I think that's one of the things that has sort of been the superpower in my relationship. My husband and I have realized, and even without trying to understand the way the sexes communicate differently, we've just learned to give each other grace that we're going to be human. And so whereas sometimes my tendency or his tendency might be, yeah, but why did you say that? You know, just drilling it in. It's like, it doesn't matter why. They're having a low self moment, you know, like they just acted out of emotion. Let's just let it go. And the more that I do that for him, the more he does it for me. And so we can just sort of let things go. But understanding the deeper layer of like, okay, well, this isn't him. It's not him being not perceptive or not paying attention to me as I would. He's wired to go hunt and gather and to survive and to provide for our family. Do I even want him to have this type of perception? Imagine us both being at a party, picking up on the subtle cues and thinking people are against us.
And that was a good point also, that you hug your toddler, and that increases the oxytocin level, that bonding chemical. So it helps you two bond with each other much more so and empathize with each other much more so as well. So the whole demand withdrawal, you probably noticed that in other couples, that's probably when other women talk to you about problems that they have. And that's probably a major dynamic that comes into play, demand withdrawal, and comes into misunderstanding of communication perception, communication abilities, and where each person's coming from.
When you were studying this, I'm sure there was a lot of things that you're like, no, I have this idea, and then you found the science to prove it. What were some of the things that really surprised you from the research?
I guess what really surprised me was that the biological explanations for it, that it's more of the consistencies within a given sex and what their abilities are. So I guess what really helped me was it simplifies things much more so, that it helps me block out the the noise and just hone in much more so on what are some of the communication differences, and knowing that's what that person's perspective is. So I think that's what really enlightened me, was understanding the other person's perspective much more so.
We've also talked a little bit about scent as one of the just senses that women are stronger in. But in your book, you talk about how body odor plays a role in attraction, which is also fascinating. I saw a big study coming out the last couple of years that were blowing the lid on like women on birth control. Their like pheromone thing was thrown off, and all of a sudden they got off birth control. We're no longer attracted to that man. But tell us about where the scent plays a part, and are we communicating at all, or communicating emotions through scent without realizing it?
Just one tidbit about the birth control. There's some research out there that female on some sort of birth control that does interfere with her oxytocin levels when she looks at her partner's face. So that can influence how rewarded she feels towards her partner with birth control. But I didn't go into too much depth with that. But with the odors themselves, chemo signals, and for you as a mother, if you were to have 5 different toddlers wear a shirt for a day or so, and then you laid them out, you would be able to sniff out which one your toddler wore through just the scent itself. When it comes to maiden types of behaviors, what usually happens in the different stages is that the female usually sniffs out the male. And what she does is, at a subconscious level, she's looking for a male that has different types of genetics, because we all have recessive genes, and we don't want our recessive genes to be expressed. So if we have too much overlap of genetics between the male and the female, that's going to increase the chances that our genes that are not being expressed, are recessive, are going to be expressed, because it just doubles the odds of it. So maybe, and a lot of times the recessive genes are not very desirable. So what happens is that the female often sniffs out a male that has genetically different types of genes, and then she gives subtle cues. And with us males, sometimes we pick up on the subtle cues, sometimes we don't. But from her perspective is that she's sort of picking the mate, she sniffs him out, and then she gives a hint towards it, and then she expects him to take the lead from there. So it may be with her standing closer to him, holding eye contact for longer periods of time, playing with her hair, the way she positions her body more towards him or whatever else, standing closer. All those can be subtle hints. And if he doesn't pick up on it, she gets frustrated and then just moves on to the next potential. So with chemo signals, it does come into play. And I would throw this out there, that probably there are times that with the new age of dating online, things like that, things may be going well in conversations online, then you meet in person and it just flops. And maybe the chemo signals play a part in it, that maybe you have too much overlap of genetics itself. So I guess my suggestion is not to disguise what your natural odors are too much with overly colognes or perfumes or whatever else. Much more of the natural odors would be much more of a natural type of selection.
You're like, can you mail me your worn t-shirt PO box before we meet in person? It's so fascinating to me, though, because we're over here in our egos thinking, oh, I'm logically choosing this person versus this person. But every single stage, from our sense of, like, we don't even realize we're creating logical meaning for feeling attracted to this person, when it could just be the way they smell. And then even the reproduction process of, a lot of people don't even realize that the egg actually opens up for the correct sperm. It's not just the one that gets there the fastest. We are choosing subconsciously on all these different levels. And that's just fascinating. And so I'm curious for you, if you were to leave people with one big piece of advice to just improve their communications between genders and really to lean into both sides' strengths rather than resisting them, what advice would you give to people?
I guess one of the biggest things is to understand communication from the other person's perspective and not just your own. So especially when we talk, we often talk what makes sense to us and not necessarily what makes sense to the other person. So know your audience and know what some of these differences are that we talked about with language ability, spatial ability, nonverbal ability, even decision making. I go into some of that in the book as well. And then also understand from the other person's perspective when they communicate. And then probably as important, and I think this is a big problem with people today, is be in the moment. That we have too many distractions, whether it's distractions in the immediate environment right now or distractions about what's going on in our head as well. So be in the moment of who you're with and the social interactions that are taking place. So be in the moment and empathize and understand from the other person's perspective are my two suggestions.
So for listeners who want to go deeper into all of this fascinating research, where's the best place to find your book or connect with you?
So the best place is to go on Amazon in the books category, and then just search my last name, Furlich, Furlich, and then my books pop up on that. And then I've been doing some articles on Psychology Today. If you go to their website and then search my last name, Furlich, Furlich, there's some articles on that. I had one that came out just before Valentine's, and it was the communicability of sexual arousal and how men and women are sexually aroused differently. And I also have other ones on body language as well. And then if anybody wants to, and it doesn't happen often, wants to send me a direct email, feel free to. It's STEPHEN, Furlich @tamuc.edu. If you have any thoughts about what you read and liked or disliked or can relate to it. One of the things that I find most gratifying about my research is when people can actually see it play out in their real lives and when they actually experience them themselves and make sense to them.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/398. Your challenge for this week is to understand communication from your partner's perspective, not just your own. As Stephen put it, be in the moment of who you're with. And then try adding a positive touch before difficult conversations. Maybe a hug, a handhold, an arm around the shoulder, a hand on the leg. This increases oxytocin levels and creates connection before you even start talking. Notice if you're both mimicking each other's body language, because that is a really powerful sign of resonance and understanding. And that's so perfect because what we are leaning into this week in Story Love is exactly this: emotional resonance. When we share our stories, we're not just exchanging words, we're inviting other people into our emotional world. And here's the magic. Understanding how differently male and female brains process these stories can create even deeper resonance. So it's not about speaking the same language. It's about actually hearing each other's unique languages and finding the harmony between them. And that's when true resonance happens, when you stop fighting against your different wiring and start appreciating how these differences create a richer, fuller story together. And you can get better at this on both ends, both in active listening, which I just recorded an episode about that'll be coming out soon, and I love this episode, but also in how you share, how you create those moments to bring people into your world and help them to feel what you're feeling. That's when you really create a movement with what you're trying to share with people. And this takes a lot of intention. So if you want to learn more about Story Love, reach out to me on Instagram or sign up for the Morning Mind Love at mindlove.com or text the word morning to 33777. This helps you just kind of get on the right wavelength from the start, starting your day with positive inspiration so that that's what you share throughout your day. So all of my sponsors are at mindlove.com/sponsors. And thanks for giving your mind a little love today. And I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.